All right, welcome everybody to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers for October 2024. Hello, more folks trickling in. For tonight's meeting, we'll be talking about my recently concluded birding trip, trip with birding to Italy, which was very fun and exciting. So I have lots of fun Italy news to share. It's probably at best like 40–50% birds and the rest is just sort of random travelogue. But that's what I've got. So that's what we're going to be looking at. A few announcements before we get going. This Saturday at 8 a.m. we will have an outing at Toro Canyon Park. There's information about that at carpbirdwatchers.org. So I hope you can make it. See you there. Oh, and then the other announcement is that the signups for the upcoming Carpinteria Christmas bird count are now live. You can sign up to be part of the count. And I encourage everybody to do that. The count this year will be on the very first day of the count window, Saturday, December 14th. So we will be kicking off Christmas count season, and I hope you have a great count. It's free, it's open to everybody. If you're experienced, that's great. If you're a beginner, that's great. You don't have to worry. We have a fun role for everybody. Okay, I think those are all the announcements. Anyone in the room have anything important to share? You want to share? So as part of the new Zoom regime, we're not enabling video for reasons that participants in previous meetings can probably figure out, but it keeps things a little more under control. So if you do wish to give input or ask questions, you're welcome to, you on Zoom. I'd say use the chat feature in Zoom to do that. Just you can send a message that way. Tom is in the room and he'll be monitoring that chat. And if I miss it, he can let me know. Okay, so let's move on to birding in Italy. So I need to share my screen and we'll see if this works. We will share sound. We will optimize for video because there's going to be a little bit of both. All right, if this is working correctly, you can now see my screen. You on Zoom, but I can't pull you to wave your hand and give me a thumbs up because I can't see you, but I'll assume it's working. Okay, so I went with my wife to Italy, and I have never really traveled before. Like I've been to Hawaii a few times. I've been to the nearer part. I've been to Ensenada on sailboat races, but no real international travel. So this was my first time actually using a passport to go somewhere. So that was exciting. And my wife has always dreamed of going to Europe and wanted to go to Europe. And I've been the one who's been kind of like, we really need to go. And so finally got it together and we went. It was relatively easy in terms of the logistics because my brother and sister-in-law were renting a villa in Tuscany for a month. And they were slotting in different people to show up and share the villa with them for different parts of that. So we came for the last 2 weeks. So it was really perfect because I had my we had a personal concierge service. They were out there finding where all the good gelato was or whatever, and then we could just show up and they could tell us where to go to get groceries. So birding was part of this, and I guess I'll start by showing, talking about my eBird life list. So if you just look at Santa Barbara County in eBird, I look pretty awesome. I've got 402 species in eBird in Santa Barbara County, which is pretty good for Santa Barbara County. But as you zoom out, I become much less awesome. So I got 441 species in all of California. I've got 475 species in all of the US. So at that point, I'm starting to look like, like very much mid-tier at best in terms of birders, certainly not an avid lister. And if you zoom out from there, you definitely see my dirty secret, which is I've never gone anywhere. Though now I have gone somewhere. I have gone to Italy. So I have 51 species that I saw in Italy, and that was really exciting. I filled in part of my map. I saw, I think, is it 39 or 49? I think 39. I think I saw 39 new species, life birds, which is very cool. If I go back and look at my eBird world life list, like right around American golden plover was the last bird I added to my life list just a few weeks back up in Santa Barbara. And then everything above that is new in Italy. So all these birds are new life birds for me, which was fun. And, you know, again, I'm still pretty parochial as a bird. I'm pretty pedestrian as a birder compared to people who go to the tropics and get 100 lifers in a day, or, you know, so maybe someday I'll do that too. But for now, this is my Italian birding experience. So here is a trip report that I have in eBird, showing the different places I birded while I was there in Italy. And basically, we flew into the Rome International Airport. That's this hotspot here. Got a pigeon or two, I think, in the airport. But I was excited, like, hey, Italian birds. I filled in that part of the map. It's now colored in. It's not gray anymore. And then we drove up to the villa, which was kind of all going along up here. And a few of these spots are single, you know, birds I saw out the window on the way up there. And then this is kind of our base of operations. This villa was near Poggiobanzi, little town in Tuscany. And it was a beautiful spot. And I went out and birded most mornings while we were there. I would go out and kind of walk around. There's like an orchard and woods and stuff. Doing birding there, like real birding with my big birding lens. And then the rest of the time, we were doing a lot of sightseeing. So we're going around to, like, you know, medieval hill towns and cities with museums and cathedrals and doing all the touristy things. And for that, what I did is I swapped out my birding lens, my 100 to 500 zoom lens on my camera, for this smaller lens that I'd picked up and then never really used much before. It's like a 24 to 105 millimeter zoom lens. And that made me look not so much like, you know, a big nature photographer with my big lens as I'm walking through the museum. It's just a regular little touristy camera. But I had the ability, if I zoomed out to maximum zoom, if there was a bird, I could get an identifiable photo. And so that's how I was sort of doing my birding during the touristy parts of the trip. So let me take a look and just kind of show you a few of these checklists. So in eBird trip reports, the oldest ones are at the bottom. So this is, you know, landing at the airport. Oh, actually, so it was pigeons. I had two rock pigeons at the airport, and 12 gull species. Like, I knew they were gulls. I didn't know what they were. I think now they probably were yellow-legged gulls, which is sort of the default bigger gull in Italy, but I didn't know that at the time. Why is it? Oh, it doesn't know who I am. Let me tell it who I am. There we go. So now I can go to a newer checklist. And so we're driving up the road, another gull spa, and hooded crows. I was very excited that I finally saw hooded crows. Hooded crows are sort of again, the default kind of countryside crow of Italy. They look a lot like our crows, except they have this cool, you know, gray and black pattern to them. So they are identifiable from a car driving along the Italian expressway. So we're continuing up the road. Eurasian magpie, again, a pretty easily identified bird because it looks a lot like a magpie. You know, I mean, magpies look, you know, like this. They're hard to mistake for anything else. So I got a Eurasian magpie as we continued to drive up the road. And then now I'm at the villa. And so at 4 a.m. the next morning, although, you know, my body had no idea what time it was at this point. It was 9 hours later, and 4 a.m. there was like the previous night, and I hadn't slept really on the plane as much as we tried. So I was just like, when we get to the travelogue photos and there's some selfies in there, you can definitely see the kind of glazed look in my eyes for the first few days. That was very apparent. So I was up at 4 in the morning hearing this tawny owl. And we did hear tawny owls most nights that we were sleeping at the villa. They're really cool. They're like the dark-eyed owls, kind of like our barred owls. And they sound like this. Take it a second to kick in. You'll get the full effect in a second. That's what they sound like. No, we never did see one, and I didn't try. I didn't go out there and use playback or spotlights. We just enjoyed hearing them. That was the only owl that I recorded in eBird while I was there. A couple times Merlin Sound ID, which I was leaning heavily on my Merlin Sound ID during much of this trip. It suggested little owl, which is sort of like, you know, screech owl size, like our smaller owls. And I listened to the recordings and it didn't sound unambiguous to me, so I never actually reported it, but there could well have been little owls there too. So here's my first morning at the villa, and I managed to get up and out at 9 a.m. and walked around the villa and to see what was there. And I got a few birds. This Eurasian jay was a life bird for me, so that was exciting. This is a pretty poor photo by the standards I apply to my bird photography, but this was by far the best photo I managed to get of a Eurasian jay. And this brings up something really interesting. So before I went on the trip, some birders who had done a lot of European birding, like from Europe, told me like, oh yeah, you're going to find it's hard. The European birds are going to be very shy compared to the birds you're used to. And I was like, oh, okay, but I'm a serious birder. I'm going to be able to find these birds. Boy, they were so right. I'm not, and I think it varies country by country. Like I've heard that England is not as bad, but Italy is definitely worse. And what I think it reflects is for these like little songbirds, these little garden birds and forest birds, there is a 2000 plus year history of them being actively hunted for food by humans. Like the jays around here have not really been hunted for food by humans. And even, with big, high impact Western civilization, we've only been here a few hundred years, but these birds have been living in a human structured landscape for millennia. And I think any birds that are inclined to be sort of casual and easygoing when it comes to being visible to nearby humans have been weeded out of the gene pool a very long time ago. So these birds were very, very hard to see. I mean, it was kind of shocking. Like I talked in a previous meeting about awareness and how I try and have the attitude that if I'm not seeing a lot of birds, it's on me. Like the birds are there, I just need to be more aware. So I was working on my awareness the whole time, and the birds were few and far between, which I think again just reflects the reality of this location. And like basically the thing I really noticed is that like around here when I'm birding, if I'm 50 100 feet away from a songbird, and I'm not doing anything loud or moving around, it's going to go about its business. It's basically going to ignore me. These birds did not do that. If I was visible to the bird within like 100 yards or more, it left. The views I got of songbirds around this villa, with a few exceptions, corvids are pretty bold and out there. Starlings are pretty bold and out there. But with those exceptions, the views I had were very brief. They were obscured by foliage, and they were distant. And a lot of times they were all three. That was the look I got at these birds. So, I mean, it's what it was. It was challenging, but it made it more meaningful when I actually saw the birds. But I saw this Eurasian jay. Again, for a second, this magpie was in view, and I got a photo of this Eurasian magpie, so that was cool. As I say, I was leaning heavily on Merle and Sandy. So a lot of these birds that I ended up reporting, not a lot, a significant number of the birds I ended up reporting were birds that I did not actually ever see. The Eurasian blackcap, I did eventually see one. Like Merle and Sandy said they were around the villa. Whenever I was birding, I was hearing them. And I did put in this recording of one. That sounded like a pretty identifiable song to me. And again, I did eventually see a blackcap. It's a really neat bird. It's one of these old world warblers. And I wish I could have gotten a photo like that, but I didn't. The one view I got of this bird, it lasted about 2 seconds and it was, in the tree and then it was gone. And I did not get a photo. And let's see what else I have in that checklist. Oh, okay, so the Sardinian warbler. Not a very good recording. Let me find a better recording of Sardinian warbler so you can hear what they sound like. And they were all around, like we were hearing those all the time. Not the song, I was not hearing that. I was hearing their calls. Let's do the calls. Which, it was sort of interesting to me, like, what I thought of it as, oh, it's that bird that sounds a little bit like a belted kingfisher rattle. So I would hear that sound, like, oh yeah, that's the Sardinian warbler. And I did actually manage to see one on the very first day, a little bit after this checklist. So that afternoon, saw a bird in the bushes, got the binoculars on it, and it looked like this. And I thought it was the blackcap because I was really looking for that blackcap, but I saw it's got this bright red eye. Like, what's going on with that? It was the Sardinian warbler. So again, I heard them multiples around the villa every time I went birding. Only saw them that one time because I was not good enough. I think, you know, in retrospect, what I would have done were I, you know, if I'd been there longer or had more time when I wasn't sightseeing, go out really early, sit down somewhere where I'm mostly concealed and just sit there for like an hour or two and see if they would maybe, you know, reveal themselves. And I have noticed like a lot of like British birders do this a lot, and other parts of this country too. They'll use hides, they'll use blinds where you go and sit in the blind and it conceals you while you're watching the bird. And I think that may be a useful thing that I would do more of were I birding in Italy again. Anyway, and then European starlings, which again were refreshingly bold and willing to be photographed, even if they were pretty far away. And this was kind of fun too, like with the starlings and Eurasian collared doves also. You know, it was neat to see them where they're not despised invaders. You know, no, this is where they're from. They live here. This is their natural environment. So they were not invasive, you know, nasty birds to be scolded. They were just doing their thing, and that was neat to see. Okay, so that was that first morning at the villa. A little later, we went for a little drive. And I talked about this, I think, before the meeting, but not during the meeting. Well, I'll get to it later, talking about the driving. The driving was like a thing for me. Like driving in Italy, I was very intimidated by the idea of like, am I going to be driving in Italy? It's going to be scary. It was not scary. It was a lot of fun. But we took a drive so I could practice like, do I still know how to do a manual transmission? You know, it turns out, yes, you know, even though it's been 30 years since I drove a manual transmission, all the cars in Italy are manual transmission. You don't forget that. It was like riding a bike. It's like, oh yeah, I'm shifting. Hey, this is fun. I'm shifting. Yay. Back at the villa, this is when I actually saw the Sardinian warbler for a second. This is that afternoon. We went into town, into Poggiobanzi, and Italian sparrow, life bird. An Italian sparrow is a house sparrow, basically. They've split them off. There's the Spanish sparrow and the Italian sparrow and the house sparrow. Now, they're three separate species. They're virtually identical. It's just so, I don't know. I don't want to, you know, denigrate the important ornithological factors that went into the decision, but to me, it kind of feels like, well, they wanted Italy to have its own endemic bird species, so they gave them the Italian sparrow. But they're basically just like house sparrows. So they were around the town. You could definitely see them. And let's see, back at the villa. Oh yeah, European robin. So this is another bird. I really wanted to see a European robin. And this is a weird personal thing. So kids growing up, we would watch these Beatrix Potter cartoons. And European robin, the robin, you know, like the English version of a robin, is sort of a prominent character in these animated films. And they're really cute, and I really wanted to see one. They look like that, you know. I did not get a photo like that. I did get a photo, but at first I just put them in the list because it kept reporting them vocalizing. I was like, well, it sure sounds like the bird in the cartoon, you know. That recording, Merlin agreed, that's a European robin. I was like, yay, put it in. Life bird. Let's see. That night, the tawny owl. You know, and that was basically my entire day. Like I was doing a lot of birding that day. Those are all the birds I got. So challenging. It was challenging birding. All right. Next morning. So the next morning I got up earlier. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get these birds. You know, I got up at 9 the previous day. I've been working on my jet lag. I was up at 7 this day and got out there and I got actual photos of a Eurasian blue tit. So these are just the cutest little birds. And, you know, they're like chickadees and titmouses that we have around here, only more colorful. So I was excited to see that. Common firecrest, which is sort of the old world equivalent of our golden crowned kinglet, close relative. This bird was there for a second and a half. I was like, I got the photo. I got an actual photo. And then this is the best photo, the best view I ever had during the entire trip of the European robin. It was singing in this olive tree. So, and I said, I'm counting it. I'm posting that to eBird. It's a 1-star photo, but it means a lot to me. So let's use that. Yeah, that's it for that list. So I think then we started to be more touristy. So the next day, actually this is later that day. So and the first place we went was San Gimignano, which is sort of the Manhattan of Tuscany is sort of its nickname in the tourist books, because it has all these medieval towers. There was this phase during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance in San Gimignano when all the rich merchants who lived there were all competing with each other to have their own towers, their own, tall towers. And they had like a jillion of these towers. They had like 50 plus towers in this town at one point. So I'm going to switch over to the touristy photos I took. So these photos are, so while I was birding, there were these cats around the villa. There were 2 cats that lived around the villa. So this is cat number 1. And since I couldn't find any birds to shoot, I would take pictures of the cats. So that's why we have the cat here at the villa. But this is my wife, Linda, on the left, and my sister-in-law, Marilyn, on the right. And we are in this cute little museum in San Gimignano that has a model of what San Gimignano looked like in 1300, when it had all the towers. And there's a whole half of the town on the left you can't see where there's more towers. So it had a lot of towers. This is us walking around, going, here we are, we're in Italy. We're very happy to be there. But again, the sort of glassy-eyed, jet-lagged stare we've got going on. Linda really exemplifies the jet-lagged look here. She's very happy to be in Italy, but she's also like asleep. Some of the towers in San Gimignano. San Gimignano is very popular. So Rick Steves is one of the guidebook authors. We've got like 6 different guidebooks before we went. And in Rick Steves' opinion, San Gimignano is the most overrated Tuscan hill town. Like everybody, all the tour buses go to San Gimignano. So we got there, a little earlier in the day, but as we were leaving, this is us walking out, the tourists are coming in, and it was like, whoa, it's like we're at Disneyland, when it's crowded here. But, there's no traffic on the streets and it's cool and everybody's walking along having gelato, and it was a lot of fun. There were these torture museums. I had no idea. So then they really stand out, and we saw them in multiple places because we're going to all these touristy towns, and they have these little kind of tourist-oriented museum of torture. Come inside and see, how the Inquisition would extract confessions. And so this is Linda like deciding, do we want to go into the torture museum? But we never actually did go into the torture museum. But we took this photo for my son, who's into like macabre stuff like that. He's a big horror movie fan. He would like that. Back at the villa, again, I can't find birds, but I'll take a picture of this lizard because it would sit there and let me take a picture of it. And the best bird photo of my entire trip was this Eurasian collared dove. It landed in the driveway. It didn't see me. It came around the corner. It popped up onto this post. It stayed there for a second before it flew off, and I got this photo. So again, it was cool to see it, where it belongs rather than where it's a recent arrival like me. So this is the little rental Fiat. So we had a big van that my brother had rented, and then he also took care of the rental of this smaller car that Linda and I mostly had the use of. The little Fiat 500, little manual transmission. It was so much fun to drive around these curvy Italian roads. And I was, very intimidated about the idea of even driving in Italy, but it turns out, no, it's totally fine. I mean, they tailgate like maniacs. They pass you when you're like, oh my God, do these people not worry about like death? They're just like passing you on these mountain roads. But other than that, it was cool. Tiny little car, tiny little parking space. I was proud of the fact that it only took me 3 tries to get the car into there and get out of the car successfully. And I didn't even have to crawl out through the hatchback. So I immortalized that with that photo. And so this is the next town we went to. This is Volterra, which is a little bit to the west of San Gimignano, a little bit longer drive. And it's known for its alabaster workmanship. They had these mines where they would mine alabaster, and they had these very skilled artisans. So going back into the pre-Roman times, back into the Etruscan times, where there was sort of like Greek sculptors would come over and then hang out and create these carvings in alabaster. And this is a cinerary urn, which I had no idea what it was, but there's a whole museum there that is filled with these cinerary urns. What they are is the burial practices in the ancient world. Some people were just buried. Some people were cremated. And the sort of upper class hoity-toity types would tend to get cremated and then have their remains stored in these fancy urns that were carved with mythological scenes and stuff. And there'd be a representation of the person kind of in the lid, sort of them lounging there on this thing with their grapes or their whatever. It was very cool. So there's a whole backstory. I used Google Lens to translate the little placard there from Italian. And this is a scene depicting Paris, and it's a big, long, involved thing, and it's not birds, so we're going to keep going. But it was really cool. We liked seeing all this stuff. Again, very tired. So Linda at this point has a cold. So on the flight over, she sat next to someone who coughed the whole way. And by day 2 of the trip, she was coughing and sneezing. Tested negative for COVID. I caught it from her. I tested negative for COVID. It's just a cold, we figure. But it was, an extra layer of like difficulty on some of these things. But this is her having a great time while she has a cold. But we're up here at this park that's at the top of Volterra and the Palazzo dei Prioris, this big old palace in the background, this medieval building that was really cool. Here's a close-up of the building. Back at the villa, it was raining. It rained a lot while we were there. But it was cool because it was sort of like a blind, like I was on the balcony of the villa and this Eurasian magpie came out and took a bath in the rain on this post. It was, fairly close. So I was very excited that I got another actual bird photo. It didn't like disappear. I was able to get, a photo of it. Nearby sites. I thought this was cool because the campanile, the bell tower of the church in this old hill town is there. And then there's these modern cooling towers for a power plant. Like, oh, we made towers then, we make towers now. We're still making towers. And this is the next day we went to Siena. And I'm excited about the touristy bit. So I guess I have to remember to get back to the bird stuff, but we'll get back to bird stuff, I promise. But this is our first trip to a bigger tourist destination. So we're going into the town of Siena, one of the big, power centers of medieval Italy. This is the Piazza del Campo, this famous big public square in Siena, where twice a year all the people from all the different districts in the town crowd in, and they have a lane around the outside where they do a horse race. They have bareback horse races where each of the different districts of the town have their champion, and it's wild. You can watch it on YouTube. It wasn't happening when we were there, but this is where it does happen, and it was cool to be there and see it. Yeah, they still do it. Yeah, it was just, some days it was rainy, some days it wasn't, some days it was like this, and then it was rainy, and then it wasn't. It was just a lot of weather going on. But yeah, I was really into this tower. When we were driving up from Rome to the villa on that first day, we went past Siena, and it was off in the distance, and you could see this tower. You could see this tower, and then behind me where I'm taking the photo, there's the other big tower, the bell tower of the cathedral. And they both stand up really high, and they're just really iconic and beautiful if you're into towers, which, I was into towers. So to me, the joke I was making in the car is like, when we were driving back to Siena, it was like when I was a kid and we were going to Disneyland and you're trying to see the Matterhorn. Like, I know it's coming. And we finally saw the tower. And so I was very excited to go see the tower in person. It was closed. We couldn't climb it, unfortunately. But I'm not sure I would have wanted to anyway. We were still a little jet lagged and like, yeah, climbing a tower. No, we're going to save our energy. There's this beautiful marble fountain in the square. The Fonte Gaia has these cool sculptures as part of it. Throughout Siena, there are these statues of a wolf suckling with 2 human children suckling. This is, the Roman era, Romulus and Remus and the founding of Rome. That's what this is. And this is the Duomo, the cathedral, the main church of Siena. And there's, so many churches. There's churches everywhere, but this is like the big main church. And there's that big tower, this big bell tower that it has. And, myself, I'm not religious. I was raised, in a pretty secular household. My grandparents, my grandfather was a Methodist minister and his father was a Methodist minister, and they go back multiple generations, but my dad kind of broke with all that. So I was raised, to be a little heathen. And I'm very interested in religion as a cultural phenomenon, and I've, learned things about it, but I have not participated. Whereas my wife, Linda, was raised as Catholic. And so for her, there was this whole extra layer of going to these big Italian cathedrals. But it really was amazing. And they were built to be impressive. They were built to be amazing and to, show people the grand nature of the church and this thing larger than yourself that you could be part of if you would, play your role within this structure. And they're still amazing. So here's just some photos from the facade of the cathedral. So that the window, that rose window in the top of the facade of the cathedral, they all have this like big window. And from the outside, it doesn't look like much, but from the inside, it's like, whoa, this stained glass. That's just very impressive. So there's a depiction of the Last Supper in that cathedral. Here's the view inside the Duomo di Siena, the cathedral there. And this really cool thing, we were very lucky about this. Like we didn't get to see the horse races in Il Campo, but we got to see the floor of the cathedral. So the floor of the Siena Cathedral has this amazing marble inlay artwork that is kept covered most of the year. And for just a few weeks each year, they uncover it and you can go in and see it. We just happened to be there at the right time to see the uncovered floor. So it was really amazing. And I didn't really take a lot of photos of it, but this one section I think really impressed me. This is one of the later pieces. Like it actually was, the floor was created, over a period of many hundred years. But this is one of the last bits that was done in the mid 1800s. So it's kind of neat to see the evolution of the art styles. Like this is a relatively late, piece of art. This is by an artist named Alessandro Franchi, and it's depicting Elijah ascending to heaven in the chariot of fire. So this is an angel holding the bridle of the horses. I just thought it was the coolest thing. And there are these frescoes. There are these, decorated walls within the cathedral. This is by Salimbeni. It's from 1611. It was completed, and it's depicting the wedding of Esther from the Old Testament. But I didn't know about frescoes. So I learned so much about frescoes. This idea that, I'm used to the idea that, you paint on canvas or you paint on wood panels, but no. This is like walls that are painted, but they're not painted on the wall. It's actually, the pigments are mixed into the plaster. So it's much more durable. So, we can be here, like this is 1611. I can be here, 400 years later, and it still looks, amazing, like it's had work to kind of, restore it and keep it up. But and they could only do, like, it took a very long time. They could only do a little section at a time because they could only do as much as they could complete in a day before that section of plaster had dried. Anyway, it was very cool. A lot of popes. There's a statue of the Pope Pius III in the cathedral there. A lot of Madonna and Child. This is from around 1400. This Madonna del Latte, as the Christ child is having his milk. This is a little chapel called the Cappella Chigi off to the side inside the cathedral that had, I thought, this really amazing statue of St. Catherine of Siena. And so then, with the internet, I can do a deep dive and learn all about St. Catherine of Siena, and like, whoa, there's a lot going on with St. Catherine of Siena. But this sculpture I thought was really amazing. More stained glass. And then this is kind of interesting too. So this is Linda pointing out the facade of the new cathedral. So in like the 1300s, I want to say, Siena was in competition with Florence, and they were like city-states, and they were big regional powers, and they were trying to be bigger and better. So they were going to make their cathedral the biggest cathedral in all of Christendom. And the way they were going to do that was that the cathedral that you've been seeing all these photos from that we were in was just going to be one section, one little transept of this larger cathedral. And the main cathedral was going to be this, enormous thing. And they built it out here. They started work on the facade, and then the plague happened. And suddenly these grand building projects kind of got the kibosh. They couldn't keep doing it. So it was abandoned. Some of it was torn down, but they kept that facade there. And you can actually go up there and like walk around on it. These are people up here walking around on on the thing. And Linda pointing it out. And there's a parking lot down here, so it's kind of interesting. It's like, oh, this is going to be this holiest place in all of Christendom, but no, it's a parking lot. And then there's the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo. So a lot of these Italian cities with big cathedrals will then have a museum separate from the cathedral that is a museum for the cathedral's work. So as they take stuff out of, as they replace stuff in the cathedral, or stuff gets older, stuff is like, they don't want it to have it out there because it's going to degrade. They want to put it in a safer setting or whatever. They'll move it into the museum. So a lot of the oldest, coolest stuff from the cathedral in Siena is in this museum associated with it nearby. So this I thought was amazing. This is the original stained glass window from the cathedral. That one with the Last Supper that I was showing earlier is a replacement. But this is the one that went in 1288. And you can go in there and you can see this, this amazing stained glass depiction of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, depicted in very artistic terms in 1288. And I just thought that was pretty amazing to me. Like where I grew up is like, if something is 100 years old, it's like, wow, that's a really old thing you got there. It's like, no, this is much older. This is me being flippant. So I took this picture, a lot of statues, and I thought this one was cute because it reminded me of the choreography in the Beyonce Single Ladies video. So I just got going, all the single ladies. Linda was not impressed. She thought I was being irreverent. Okay, so this is amazing. So this is called the Maesta, and it's this altarpiece that was done by Bunisegna, I want to say. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It finished in 1311, and it was this amazing work. It was considered like the most amazing artwork of its day. It was paraded through the streets of Siena on its way to be installed in the cathedral. And this was just one piece of it. This Virgin Mary and the Christ child and all these saints arrayed around her. And there's other parts of it. And there was actually a backside to it that had the life of Christ and all these different depictions. But it's just very impressive. This is John the Baptist. That was cool. He kind of stood out to me in the assembled saints. This is some of the work from the backside of it that's now separate. You can see in the museum. Thought this was neat. So, here is the risen Christ appearing to the disciples, and they're like, "Yeah, really?" And he's like, "Yeah, check it out. I got the wound right here." This is the Basilica of San Domenico in Siena. So, another huge church that's just off to the side. It's not even the main cathedral. And there is a relic of St. Catherine of Siena in that basilica, which I did not get to go see. But after I learned all about St. Catherine, I was like, wow, I should like to go check that out. This is Villa Cat number 2. And this is the next place we went. I guess I'm going to switch back to birding for a second. Whoops, no, go back. Where do I have that? Not the robin, not the this. Yeah, I'll just go forward through these. Resto, Volterra with the cinerary urns. Oh, it was a bird of prey. So I actually saw a bird of prey from the villa. Turns out it was a Eurasian kestrel. So that was cool. I was excited about that. Because birds of prey are always the best. This is that jay that took a bath in magpie rather, that took a bath in the rain that you saw earlier. These are more pictures of it. It was there for a while. So I snapped a lot of photos. So I'm getting better, 9 species. I mean, again, I didn't see most of these. Eurasian green woodpecker was a real nemesis bird for me. Kept hearing it, and I saw it twice for like a split second, but I never had a good look at it. But it sounded really cool. So I want to have you hear what it sounds like. It sounds like that. It's kind of like a flicker. It eats ants and it hangs around in the ground a lot. Okay. So keep going newer. So we went to Siena. So this is to give you an example of how the tourist camera, with the smaller lens, this is my photo of a hooded crow flying overhead on our way into Siena. So you can see, you can tell it's a hooded crow. It's not a great photo, but you got to make sacrifices. And then back at the villa. Oh, we did see a common buzzard circling. I was driving on the road to where I'm going to talk about next, Monteriggioni. Sort of like a red-tailed hawk. Did not get a photo because I was driving. Linda would have been very upset if I tried to snap a photo while I was driving. But we did get a look at it as we drove along circling. It's like, oh, it's like a buteo, right? It's like it's a common buzzard. That's what it is. It is sort of in the same sense that red-tailed hawks are kind of the default, hawk around here, the default buteo. Common buzzard is the default hawk in much of Europe. Okay, so then into Monteriggioni. And you can kind of see from my eBird track, like, boy, did we cover Monteriggioni all the way around. So let's show you what it looks like. So this is Monteriggioni in Google Earth. And what it is it's this really cool, like, castle. It's like a very big castle or a very small town. It's surrounded by these walls. It was an outpost, a military outpost at the northern edge of the state of Siena. That Siena, the city, was sort of the capital of its own little country. And this was along its northern border where it bordered with its hated rival Florence to the north. And if you wanted to come through here with your army, you had to deal with this little fort. And it's been preserved really well. And it's just like the cutest little thing, you can go in there and hang out. And it was pretty birdy. So you can walk around the outside edge. And over here I think this is the northern side. Yeah, on the northern side, there's a little cemetery, but there's this little forest, and there was a lot of birds in there. So my checklist oh, that was a mistake. I don't know how I did that, but we're done looking at that anyway. My checklist from there was pretty decent, and it included a life bird, a European goldfinch, which I swear that's what that is. But if you check it out better, like, it was vocalizing as it flew over, so I had an idea it was something special and different that I hadn't seen up to that point. That's what it looks like. And I did not get this good a view, but in flight, eventually there's some flight photos. It looks kind of like that, which is kind of what I photographed. So that was exciting. Okay, so we'll go back to travelogue. So this is Linda at the entrance, at the entrance to Monteriggioni. There's just two openings, right? Because everything else is walls. So you go inside there, and it's this quaint little place. And there's a museum of armor. And in the Museum of Armor, there's this whole display of Assassin's Creed merch. So my son is a gamer, right? He grew up playing video games. And as a parent, you want to, like, can you not play so many video games? He's like, no, Dad, I got to play video games. And there was this whole part where he was making the campaign for why he should get to play this video game, because it's got historical context. Assassin's Creed is based in the medieval city of Monteriggioni, and they recreated the city in the game. And it's totally true. Like, I've watched him play this game as he's growing up, and it's Monteriggioni. It's that town. So they're in the gift shop for the museum. There's this whole section of Assassin's Creed merch, because I guess they get a fair amount of gamer tourism, people coming to Monteriggioni to walk through the town that they've played in the game. And it's, like I say, it's an armor museum, so it sort of tracks the history of armor. Has this little diorama, this little display with these little figures showing how the attack would work. This is a siege tower, and they're trying to get over the walls, and the archers are up here on the tower parts shooting down at them. Linda thought this was very cute. She pulls me aside and goes, John, it's like a school project, it's like this little museum. Because we've been going to, like, Siena with its beautiful, artwork from 1,000 years ago. And this was like, and I say, hey, that kid got an A if that was a school project, because that's very detailed stuff. I really like the Army Museum. This is the church, the oldest building in Monteriggioni. It's the Chiesa di Santa Maria Assunta, and built in the 13th century. And you can go inside. It's a working church, and you can go inside and see what's going on in the church. It's just very cool. So you can also, you pay like €1, €2, and you can walk up on the walls and walk around on the walls. So as you go up, you can see the church from the outside. It's the church with its bell tower. Here's this really cool plaza, the Piazza Roma. There's like restaurants. We ate at this restaurant over here. It's the best food I had in Tuscany. There's a lot of really good food in Tuscany, but it was really good. The pappardella with the boar. It was like, I got that there, and that was the best one. And then we had cappuccinos here. We went back to Monteriggioni a fair number of times because we really liked it. But this well is in the game. This is up on the walls. And like, again, in Assassin's Creed, you do like parkour, like you go running along these walls and you jump on the roofs and you roll across the roofs and stab people. I don't know. It's much tamer these days, but very pretty. This is that little cemetery outside the walls. And just walking around the walls. Little villa you can stay at that's off to the side of Monteriggioni. Had this display with these mirrors. I took an artsy selfie. It's like, there I am, taking a picture in the mirror. And that's us leaving Monteriggioni. So birding. So we're back to birding. So one day in the trip was just birding. Like, and we talked about this beforehand, and Linda was on board, and I was excited about it. So even though I had acquired the cold from her at this point, and I was kind of like, oh, am I going to be able to go to the concert in Florence? And yeah, it's like, well, I'm going to do the birding, even though I was, kind of coughing and not feeling too well. So we hired a birding guide. His name is Marco Valtriani. And he took us out for the day. We met him in Siena, and then he drove us south to the coast. So we went to this cool wetland at Orbitello, and then there's like a regional park della Maremma up here, and saw a lot of cool birds that I would not have seen otherwise, for sure. Again, because you're with an experienced birder, and he's able to go, oh, common shelduck, and I'm like, lifer. But I would not have been able to identify the common shelduck. But for me, the really exciting thing was the flamingos. We saw hundreds of flamingos. I've seen flamingos, of course, as a kid growing up, we went to the San Diego Zoo, and there's like, all these flamingos, but they're tame, they're pet flamingos, they're captive flamingos. I've seen them in the wild a few times, but they were escapees. They're flamingos that got away from the zoo. These are actual bona fide flamingos that live there. And so that was really neat to see these greater flamingos. Definitely enjoyed the flamingos. They were a birding highlight of the trip for me. I think so, but again, my knowledge is very limited. Here, let's go see what they do. Yeah.
Were you here in Montepulciano by chance?
Yeah, so the people staying in the villa with us did like go to Montepulciano to do a wine tasting one day, and we did not do that.
Well, the reason I ask is I had a birding guide, and we stayed in Montepulciano when he was in school there one time, and I had a birding guide named Marco.
It was probably the same guy. There's only a few birding guides in Italy.
Which in the morning he was like, yeah, probably a decade ago.
Yeah.
And he was great. I had a great time with him. Wow. And it was really interesting to be, anyway. Sounds like it's probably the same guy.
Just from a size reference, how bigger is a flamingo than a blue heron?
It's like blue heron size.
About the same size.
It's like a big wading bird. Yeah, it's not small. And this is a greater flamingo. Yeah, I'm gonna keep going, but you can go any bird. You can see they do live down in Africa. So maybe it's like they're up here and then they migrate. I'm not sure. A lot of I'm holding forth like I'm an authority at this point. I'm an authority on like one day. It's like I was there on that one day and there were flamingos. I haven't really researched beyond that. But I really did like seeing them. What else did we see? Flamingos. Great crested grebe, distant views. Again, a lifer. And there were some shorebirds, which was cool. Common ringed plover, which I thought of as a analog of a semi-palmated plover, although it is a little different. Common red shank shorebird with red legs. And again, I was very dependent on Marco for these IDs because he'd be like, oh, and then I'd see a bird I knew. I was like, oh, a dunlin. I know this bird. It's a bird I know. So that was cool. Seeing birds I knew. The gulls were really cool. I didn't get good gull photos, but there were yellow-legged gulls, which are basically a recent split. They're herring gulls, right? They're closely related to herring gull. They've recently been split off into their own separate species, yellow-legged gull, but they look like herring gulls. There's black-headed gulls, which are, sort of smaller gulls with black heads in their breeding plumage. They were not in their breeding plumage. They looked like this when I saw them. Oh, you know what? Did I do the wrong thing? No, I meant to go back. Yeah. Show all details, go back to that. And then slender-billed gull, which looked a lot like a black-headed gull, except it really did have a very slender bill. And, we weren't that close. We saw them through the scope, but, I mean, beak structure in gulls is super important. And when you saw this gull swimming around next to the black-headed gull, like, wow, that thing's got a really long, thin beak. Hence the name, slender-billed gull. And where am I? Here we go. Great cormorant. Looks like a double-crested cormorant, only a little bigger. Eurasian spoonbills, they were way off in the distance, had very unsatisfying views, but they were definitely Eurasian spoonbills, so another life bird. Ospreys, so there were ospreys there, and Marco was really excited about the ospreys because they only have a few breeding pairs of ospreys in all of this part of Italy. So he was excited to see them. He's like, of course, for you, they are commonplace. I was like, no, ospreys are very cool. Ospreys are always cool, even though we do have them where I'm from. Eurasian kestrel, again, the same bird I photographed from the villa. And then a little bit later in the day, we went to this park along the beach. So the really neat thing about, having your own like bespoke birding guide is the birding is exactly tailored to your specifications. So we saw the flamingos, which I really wanted. We saw the shorebirds. And then he was like, okay, so what do you want to do? We go till 5 if you want to keep going. And I was, as I said, fighting the cold. I was like, I think we're just about done. Maybe one more stop. And he's like, okay, let me find one more cool place to go. So he said, I know. And he took us to this place, this park. It's like a forested area near this section of beach that's like a natural park, a reserve. And we're driving up to it, and he's like, okay, he says, prepare your eyes. So that was cute. We're like, Marco, we live near the beach. We know like seascapes, So it was really pretty though. So he took us there, and we saw there's great tit. This is the only great tit I actually saw. I kept hearing it at the villa, but I finally saw one with Marco. So that was cool. But he's like, prepare your eyes. So we went, and we came to this place, which was really cool. There were almost no birds there. There was a hobby, which is sort of like another falcon, similar to a kestrel, I could not get photos of. But other than that, I kept hoping there'd be like pelagic birds going by, see some cool shearwaters, but no, there were no birds while we were there. There's Marco. And there's Linda staring out to sea. Yeah, it's got to be him. As I say, there's only like 3 or 4 birding guides in Italy, and he is the main one. And this is Linda coming out of the ocean. I only noticed today as I was looking at these slides and putting them together. We're going to come back to this slide in a minute, right? But just look the way she is. She's emerging from the water, the wind-swept hair blowing to one side. Okay, just keep that image in mind. But she was having a great time there. So then we went to Florence. The first view of the cathedral in Florence was right at 8 a.m. when the bells started going. As I say, I'm, an atheist. But I was like, if I was prone, like this would be like, oh my God, amazing. It was very moving. Okay, go on. This is the facade of the Duomo di Firenze, the main cathedral in Florence. It's beautiful, just like the one in Siena, only completely different from the one in Siena. More popes. Pope Boniface VIII, I guess, was very important to the creation of this cathedral, so they put his statue on the facade. And then there's the Uffizi Gallery. So I haven't talked at all about it, but the Medici family was the big, powerful, family in medieval and Renaissance times in Florence that kind of ruled a lot of Italy. And they're very important, very wealthy. And then their line kind of died out, and this woman, I forget her name, who was sort of the last of the Medici line, she gave all her stuff, you know, to create this awesome museum. So there's a lot of Medici funded artwork in the Uffizi Gallery. It's this, you know, super popular, as you can see here, super popular gallery. And it's got these Botticelli. So it's got Primavera, is this painting by Botticelli that you can barely see in the background. But to me, I was more interested in just the spectacle of this crowd, because it was really rainy on the day we were in Florence. And so they kind of adjusted, the tour groups are supposed to come through in like little dribs and drabs, and they just let them all kind of flood into the museum because it was awful outside. So it was really crowded. And I just thought the spectacle was really cool. Like I was imagining if Botticelli was around today and you could see this scene, like, you know, 500 years from now, people are going to be thronging to see your great work of art. And in my imagination, Botticelli's like, well, yes, of course they are, because it is wonderful. Because look, I created this masterpiece for all the ages. They'll be still coming 1,000 years from now. And then in the room next door is the Birth of Venus. And I am convinced that although she didn't do it on purpose, Linda was recreating the birth of Venus as she emerged, because there's the wind blowing her hair and she's right at the edge of the water. And I thought that was cool. But the birth of Venus is very cool. This is certainly one of the more amazing artworks I saw during the trip, and worth fighting the crowds. This is a map of the state of Florence. And I'm looking at it like, you know, this is a medieval map of the state of Florence with the city of Florence in the middle. And then is that like a lake? It's like, no. That's the state of Siena. They relegate it to like this blue blank area because it's not important. It's our hated rival. We don't have to show you details of Siena. But if you zoom in, there's Monteriggioni, where that fortress is that's right on the border that we were talking about with the Assassin's Creed merch today. And then here's Poggiobanzi, where we were staying, is this little place right here. Thought it was cool that you could see it on the map. This is Saturn. This is the Galileo Museum. So, you know, had no plans to go there. We just wandered in because it was less crowded than a lot of the other places right across the street from the Uffizi Gallery. But it's got all this amazing stuff from Galileo and other sorts of, you know, fancy instruments. And I'm a navigation nerd from way back when. So this was really cool to me, and an astronomy nerd. So I'm in there, I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm looking at this little display that nobody else is paying much attention to. And I'm like, oh my God, these are Galileo's actual telescopes that he used to be the first person to see, like, oh, the moon has mountains on it, and Jupiter has these little lights, these little satellites that go around it, and the Earth is not the center of the universe. And the Pope was very unhappy with Galileo for these discoveries, but these are the telescopes he used to make those discoveries. Thought that was neat. So this is near the Central Market. I sent this video to my son. He's a film buff, he's a film studies major at school. And I just titled it Los Angeles, November 2019, which is the opening title credits on the original Blade Runner. This is what the city of Los Angeles looks like in Blade Runner, the original movie. And it looks just like this when they're walking through these stalls in the rain. So he sent me back a gift of Blade Runner that he obviously got the reference. Anyway, I thought this was fun. And then we went to Civita di Bagnoregio. So this was this longer trip we made towards the end. We've done the birding trip, and it's all kind of just sightseeing from here on out. But we took this really long drive, and I was kind of ambivalent about going. Do we really want to drive for like 3 hours to go see this other cool hill town? But my brother was doing the driving. I was like, yeah, that's okay. But then I drove back, so I was like, but it was worth it. So this is this city that only a few people actually live in now. It's sort of this dying town because it's eroding away. It's like some of the buildings have actually fallen off, but it's got this really cool bridge you walk to get into it. Linda's got a thing for heights, and she's like, okay, I'm going to do this. But she was looking pretty happy here. But by the end of the walk, she was like, oh, okay, we're done. Because it's kind of high up as you're going along this bridge. It's my brother and sister-in-law in Civita di Bagnoregio. And then we went to Orvieto, which is the other town nearby. And this is the thing I was really excited to go to because it sounded amazing. And it is amazing, this cathedral in Orvieto. It's like when you see the town from a distance, it looks sort of like all these other hill towns. And then it's got this cathedral sticking up out of it that looks like 5 times bigger than it ought to be. It was just this huge cathedral they created that towers over this town. And it's got an amazing facade, gargoyles. I was very into this cathedral. Inside, there's just this incredible sense of space. They're doing some work on the side, so they had scaffolding, but it's just still enormous. It's my brother and sister-in-law. Oops. So, and it's got these little chapels off to each side. So each of the, I forget what they're called, the little extensions. So the cathedrals, the floor plan is like a big cross, and there's the main nave as you walk in, and there's the altar at the end, and then there are these little extensions off to each side. And at the Cathedral in Orvieto, on the left side is the Chapel of the Corporal, and it was a whole story that I didn't put in these photos and didn't really talk about, but it was, there's this relic there, this relic of this miracle that happened where the priest was doubting and he was doing the service, and the communion host started to bleed onto the corporal, which is the piece of cloth underneath as he's doing this. And so it was miraculous. It was the blood of Christ appearing on this corporal. And so that corporal, that piece of cloth, is in this reliquary. It's saved in this little chapel, and it's a working chapel, and they actually had a service in there, and it was very cool. But on the opposite side is I forget what it's called. It's this other chapel. It's the Chapel of San Brizio. And it's got these amazing frescoes that are just like so intense. And I was just in there like checking out these frescoes. They had to drag me out of there because I was just very into it. This is the preaching of the Antichrist. And I really felt there's a lot of resonance with like sort of modern day politics, with the politics that were going on in the time when this was done in like around 1500. It's very, very cool. This is Signorelli. It's a self-portrait by the artist who created these. He put himself in there. It depicts the apocalypse. It depicts the damned in hell with these demons abusing them. It's all just very, very emotional and intense, and like not what I was expecting to find in this cathedral, but it was really, really fun. This is just a video of Linda driving back to the villa, which I'm going to skip because, we got to get out of here. And this is where I birdwatched at the villa. This is where I like struggled. This is right where I saw that robin with the obscured photo, like was right here. So that is basically it. That was our trip to Tuscany. It really was beautiful. We didn't want to leave. We're looking forward to going back sometime. And I'll be well armed to hopefully see some more of the birds that I know were there that I did not see this time. Okay, so I don't know if there's any questions or any commentary or feedback, but that was our talk. We'll get back to some more like bird focused talks in the future. I promise. It won't just all be travelogue because I'm not going anywhere soon. So yeah, we'll talk about birds. Hope to see you all on Saturday, or at least some of you on Saturday at Toro Canyon Park, where we will see some confiding birds. This was a term that bird watchers, I've heard like British bird watchers, you would say, oh, that bird was very confiding. And I was like, what do you mean it's confiding? It's a weird name to describe a bird's behavior. But I understand now. It's like from the context of European birding, our birds around here are very confiding. They'll like let you see them. They'll just hang out. They don't care. So we'll go see some confiding birds. I've definitely been appreciating that since I returned, to be able to go out and see birds, like go bird watching and actually have birds to watch, not just see like little rustles in the bushes that disappear. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I will end the meeting and see you all.